What are some things that you would say to people if they're thinking about using LinkedIn ads for the first time, perhaps? What do they need to know? What should they be aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So I think the first thing that you're going to want to do when you're thinking about LinkedIn advertising is really sort of think about your organic strategy and where you are with that. So if somebody gets in touch with me and they say that they want to use LinkedIn advertising, obviously that gives me a bit of time before our meeting for me to kind of look at what they're doing from an organic perspective, because everything that you do for organic can be used to be more efficient and effective with your LinkedIn advertising campaign. So what I'd be looking for is, do they have a company page? What type of posts are they putting out onto that company page? What topics are they looking at producing, and how is that engagement as well? And then also their individual profiles and how are they managing content for that? There's so much that you can learn from the organic perspective to help you understand more about what type of content is resonating, but also the types of audiences that you're attracting with that content. So I think from my perspective, if somebody comes to me and they don't have an organic strategy and they're kind of coming in quite cold with that, it's going to make that LinkedIn advertising quite difficult to do, because you're going to have to use some of that budget to really understand who your audiences are on LinkedIn. And if you don't have that messaging or any of that great content strategy from organic, it's going to be more expensive for you to use the platform. And so that's kind of what I'm looking for first, really, is a strong organic presence, because that gives me the indication that somebody has an understanding of who their audiences are, the content that they're sort of using, and that they've also got the time and the resources to actually manage that as well. So that's the kind of first thing I think that's really important with when you're thinking about your advertising, is what are you doing organically that you can take and grow into your ads. I think the second thing is probably your audiences, yeah? So do you really understand who your audiences are? Because there is so much that you can do with LinkedIn targeting. And if you're not quite sure, and if you're not, whether or not you can have a couple of different audiences, that's not the issue. But I think if you're not sure on how to use LinkedIn for targeting your audiences, again, that can make it really expensive. And I know that that's how people feel about LinkedIn ads generally, that they are quite expensive to use, and that's another way that it can make it expensive. So that's probably something else to consider, is making sure you're really strong on who your audiences are. The next one, oh, sorry, go on.
Well, I was going to ask with regards to that, for people who aren't familiar with the platform, how do you target the people you want your advert to see? So how do you create that audience, and what ad formats are available to people to choose between?
Yeah, absolutely. So that the targeting that you can use on LinkedIn is amazing. It really is. If you're trying to target people within sort of working environments, there's no other platform that really touches it. And the reason being is because all of the information that you put into your LinkedIn profile when you first start with LinkedIn are targeting capabilities. So there's either the actual information that you put in, so for example, your job title, or the name of the company that you work at, and then there's kind of more inferred data. And that could be potentially, your age, or whether or not you're male or female, or it could be, your sort of interests, etc. So there's lots of different targeting available, but that's kind of two different ways that you can approach it. The main ways of targeting that you can have are things like geography, so obviously the location, different countries. You can have obviously company size. And the way that they do that is that they look at the company and see how many employees there are within the company that you're working at. So you can target by company size. You can target by job function, job seniority. You can target by your job title. You can upload companies as well, company names. You can target by interests, by skills, by the groups that they look at. So there's just so much great ability to target with LinkedIn, which is why it's so important that you have a clear understanding of who your audiences are, when people kind of come to me and they're like, oh, we've got this audience set, even if it doesn't really match what LinkedIn have specifically, you can kind of work out how to match it into what LinkedIn have to offer. And there's so many different other ways you can target as well, but I don't want to overwhelm people with so much information. So as I said, they're kind of some of the key ones. I think also something to bear in mind is that depending on the targeting, it can cost more. So for example, if you are going quite granular and you're going for kind of, sort of higher sectors or sort of like, or job titles, it can cost more. So sometimes if you can try and keep the cost down, you can play around with your targeting, and that can also help. So that's kind of just some of the ways that you can use the LinkedIn targeting. You mentioned, formats as well.
Yes.
Yeah, so the format. So there's different ways that you can advertise, obviously, on the platform, and the majority of the ads formats that I recommend are kind of under the sponsored content umbrella. And that's where you'll kind of recognize them because you'll see them in your own feed, and obviously they can appear on mobile and also desktop, which is great. They're really versatile. You can use video, you can use images, you can use things like document posts where you're swiping through as well. And they're just a really good way of kind of looking like great, nice content on your feed, and they do help to kind of engage the user. And obviously you can buy those on sort of CPC, which is just a great way of getting people again to sort of pay for the ads through the CPC costing method. And then you've also got sponsored messaging. So the sponsored messaging is when you've got your inbox and you see messages coming through in your inbox, and you might get like a message from an individual, but it's actually a sponsored ad. But that's actually kind of like a sort of, I suppose, a more lower end of the funnel approach. I think the great thing about sponsored content is that it can kind of sit with your brand awareness and then kind of move through that funnel as well, which is why it's so great. Some of the other ones that I'm mentioning might be a bit more expensive and might sit at different levels of that funnel. So messaging is great, but you might want to think about how you use that for various offers and etc. And then there's also conversation ads as well that sit in that. And you might have seen those where you click in and you see a small amount of text, and then it will give you various different options of how you want to move the conversation further. So it might give you options like, I want to attend a webinar, or I'd like a guidebook or whatever, and then it will prompt you with another message, and that's conversation ads. And then there's dynamic ads as well. So there's dynamic, I don't tend to work with those as much because they're actually more for desktop than they are for mobile. But they're another way of probably used more for talent solutions and also for generating followers. But I would say that they're quite an expensive way to kind of generate followers. So I'd probably not use those so much. And then you've also got your text ads, which are kind of the cheaper option that you'll see again on desktop, which is just like one small line of text. And they are, again, I don't tend to use them as much, and they tend to fit a little bit lower down the funnel. So that kind of gives you a bit of an overview and the kind of formats and targeting that's available.